Well, honestly, and it's funny because everybody wants to hear Glory Day ECW stories. Most memorable moment for me with Sandman is actually that entrance at ECW One Night Stand. I mean, and 5 years after we go out of business, to hear that crowd sing that song with that passion, and I had just done my promo, and it was probably, and now sometimes Triple H will produce the announcers, or Michael Cole will produce the SmackDown announcers, but at the time, no one had ever been on headsets giving instructions to the announcers except for Vince McMahon. And Vince sat next to me during that show, and I was on the headsets with the announcers during that show. And I did my promo, and I came back and I put the headsets on. And it was also the very first event I had ever taken my children to. And they were very young. I mean, my son was 13 months old, so my daughter was 2.5. And no, she was not even 2005. She was just about 3 years old. And so it was very emotional for me, because I just figured at least I could always tell my children, you'd been to an ECW show, because they were born after ECW. And the entire night, with the exception of when I got into the ring and it just kind of hit me like, wow, enjoy this because it's the last time you're going to feel it in your life. The entire night, I tried not to be emotional because we had a show to run. And I just finished my promo, which was emotional for me, and now I'm back in the groove, I'm back in business, and the Dudleys get in the ring. And I was kind of pissed off because I wanted the Dudleys to be able to cut one of their promos, and you know, there were very few restraints on me for that show, and that was one of them. You know, just they were not going to let Bubba go where Bubba used to go. And they weren't going to let Bubba and Devon go where they used to go, which was into the crowd, beating up our fans, causing a riot, and getting all of us sued multiple times over. So then Tommy Dreamer comes out, and Tommy was such a right-hand man to me for so many years. I mean, we rode together those 7.5 years in ECW. He was my riding partner. To see him feel that for one last time in his life. And I still wasn't getting emotional because it was still just business. It was still just putting on the show. And then the Sandman's music hit, and the whole audience starts singing his song. And I just started, I had tears running down my face, sitting in Gorilla with the headsets on, because it was just, it was everything that you want from an ECW crowd and everything that you want for the ECW crowd, because it's the celebration. It's why people used to come to our show. Some people came for blood and guts. Some people came for Malenko versus Guerrero. Some people came because the Public Enemy were so cool. Some people came to see Sabu put his opponent or himself through a table. And some people just came because it was the greatest party in town. And that song was the epitome of the ECW experience, because everybody sung it with this drunken guy whose matches usually sucked, and nobody cared. Nobody cared. Nobody paid to see the Sandman wrestle. They paid to sing the song. And they were singing that song, and I'm just sitting there saying, man, if I could just one day tell my children, you want to see ECW? You want to get the ECW experience? And I realized, instead of telling my children, tell the big Irishman next to me. And I just hit Vince on the arm, which he didn't like, by the way. He didn't like it. You know, I got one of these. What are you hitting me for, pal? And it's all right. Because he could really whip my ass. I mean, you know, a lot of people joke, I'd like to beat up Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon would kick my ass. And I just looked at him and I go, hey, that's ECW. And he sat there and he was eating a protein bar. He really was. He was eating a protein bar and he goes, Sandman, I get it, the music. And their life. And at that moment, I realized that's the ultimate Sandman story. That was just the moment. That was just the moment I realized, man, I love that character. Do you guys know the story about the power blowing out that night? You do, right? I mean, what happened was we had a countdown, and we were very close to going over the limit of the pay-per-view. And the contract with the pay-per-view specifically said if we go over limit, we don't get paid. And we went off the air with around 42, 43 seconds before we were going to have to default on getting paid by the pay-per-view company. So we're off the air, and collectively, everyone in that audience takes this deep breath, because it was the audience that truly brought us on the pay-per-view. It was the, I wasn't this great negotiator that forced the pay-per-view industry to accept ECW. It was you. It was a crowd like this. It was people who were fans of the product that were so of the belief that this product belonged on pay-per-view that they picketed outside of the offices of the cable companies. They wrote faxes. Anybody remember faxes? Or am I really dating myself here? They sent faxes, which is like sending tweets. Today they would be on Twitter and just, you suck. And I mean, they bombarded the pay-per-view companies until the pay-per-view companies, just to shut the fans up, put us on pay-per-view. So this audience brought us to pay-per-view, and once the show was over, they just went, wow, hey, we did it, this was us. And the audience starts chanting ECW, and now they want a speech. Because back then, as opposed to now, obviously, I used to like to talk. So they wanted to hear a speech, because I used to give these rallying cries as the head of our religion. And I used to give these rah-rah speeches for the crowd to really pump them up and thank them for believing in ECW. And I went out to the ring, and literally, as I started to make my way down from the top stage, which was in the ECW arena, you just heard, and the whole power went out. We blew out the generator and the backup generator, and all the power went out in the arena. And I stood in the middle of the ring, and we had to just go like, even in the back row, can you hear me now? And this is what it was like. There was no microphone for me to talk to everybody. And if you notice how more intimate it can be when everybody stays quiet and your focus is on one person projecting out to you. What? I didn't hear it. I hope it was good, because if it's a heckler, I'm gonna whip your So it was just so intimate that the first feeling that I had was, and I'm not a religious man, I'm really not, and I don't talk about religion, because I don't really share my religious beliefs with a lot of people, because I don't really know what my religious beliefs are. And I can't even tell you if I have a belief in God, but I will tell you that at that moment when we were all together in this arena and every fan loved each other, and we're loving each other in the middle of presenting, at the time, the most violent product in professional wrestling. Blood and guts and chair shots and tables and suplexes on people's heads, and here we all love each other. And just the dichotomy of it all, and the intimacy of it all, to me, if God wasn't inside the ECW arena on that night, I can't tell you what kind of biblical or from the heavens type of power was in that arena that night, but there was something there. and everybody who was there experienced it. And that's why none of us kind of talk about it, because none of us can understand it. Because we all walked away like, what the hell was that? We're like, I don't know. It's just, we were all together, like all at one point, like, you know, we're all just very intimate with each other, celebrating this uber violent product. And then everybody left the building and we just went on with our lives. That was my first thought after the pay-per-view, like, oh my God, what just happened?